Hello, hello, hello. Welcome, everyone. It's exactly 3 o'clock. I welcome everyone to the 7th edition of our virtual talk series, powered by the IABC West Africa Interest Group. I'm Dr. Beryl Lehondo, and I'm honored to be your moderator for today. I'm going to be telling you a bit more about IABC, and we're hoping that after now, you'll be interested in joining us. Yes. Next slide. So we've done over 50 years as IABC. That should tell you something. It's a place to be. We are about boosting organizational culture, productivity, profitability, and strategic communication. That's the summary of everything we do at IABC. And so the International Association of Business Communication is a global network of communication professionals. We have the West Africa Interest Group, which is a member of the Africa region, and it covers IABC members across West African coast. Like I mentioned earlier, we provide a credible platform for networking, mentoring, peer learning, and thought leadership on creating values and solving problems through strategic communications. We're also mobile, we're also social. We're out there on Twitter, IABC Africa _ WAIG, on YouTube, IABC Africa WAIG, and our website is active also. You can reach us. After now, this session will be on YouTube, so you can have access to it. You can become a member today just by visiting our website. And part of the things you get is connections that help your career, tools that you can leverage for results, and you can get content that will keep you informed about business, about communications, so much more. Credentials that will also help you raise your profile, boost your opportunity for career growth, and then you learn to stay sharp. We look forward to having you join IABC. These are team leads for the West Africa Interest Group, okay? We have Madam Shola there, great people, Yemi, Nkem, and Mary, Chido, Daboni, Tubosun, Chisim, amazing people. You should meet them. They're also on LinkedIn. You can connect with us on Twitter, on LinkedIn, on YouTube. And whilst you're having conversation, while this session is on, feel free to tweet at us. Look at our hashtags, hashtag IABCWAIG talks, hashtag IABCWAIG, hashtag IABC Africa. We want to see your comments. We want to see everything you have to say about this event as it is ongoing. Our panelists are here, and we'll be introducing them shortly. You see details of them on your screen. First, here is Olayinka Edmond. She's a lead internal communication person at MasterCard Foundation, Lagos, Nigeria. Beautiful personality. I've seen her, I've listened to her a little bit, checked her out, and you're sure to get a lot from her today. Deji Ogunubi, next person, is a chartered professional in human resources, and he's so well-rounded. He's covered several countries across different continents, covering talent acquisition, management, learning and development, so much more around HR. Then we have Joke Adu. She's AGM Corporate Affairs, Branding and Marketing, Standard Chartered Bank, Lagos, Nigeria. Again, she has worked across different countries, and you can be sure you're going to get value, today. I hope you have a pen and paper. I hope you're going to write down something. I hope you're going to tweet whatever we're doing here, post something, say something about it on LinkedIn, and we'll be following up. Thank you for joining us. I want you to do something to keep this place engaging. You're going to use those icons there to raise your hand if you ask a question, clap your hand when you hear something that you really like, okay? put a comment, say something, just let me know that you are there. For now, all the participants, as you join in, put your name and where you are tweeting from, or where you are joining us from, YouTube, Zoom, put your name there and your location, and then you can use your favorite emoji just to be sure you are there and you are live. Thank you. Now we move to our panelists. We're glad to have every one of us here, and we have our videos on. I hope we know that this event is being recorded. So please just bear with us. Keep your cameras on. Thank you for giving us permission to do the recording today. Once again, my name is Beryl Honda, and I'll be your host for this session. Let's move on. Without an effective communication strategy in place, work can be highly challenging. Businesses can be highly challenging. And this session is very interesting, especially for me. I've been researching employee communication for about 5 years, and I've seen how it can boost the success of a business or otherwise. It fosters collaboration, it supports employees' health and well-being, makes them stay productive, stay engaged. But with the business environment becoming more challenging due to volatility, uncertainty, complexity, and ambiguity, which is summed up as Vuca, adequate mitigations require an increasing shift in workplace communication, and this puts demand on leadership to accommodate and communicate more with their stakeholders. Okay, now this afternoon we will attempt to explore the tools and practice that will enhance employee communication and management, perhaps even boosting employee engagement. We will look at the processes that facilitate them, as well as metrics to measure their effectiveness, all in a bid to ensure that employees are motivated and productive. If you're an employee on this call, you are learning this to also help yourself. As a business leader, you are also looking at this to try and improve your environment. This webinar is going to be interactive. Drop your questions, your views, your comments, and we will pick them up and get our panelists to respond. Now we want to give our panelists 2 minutes each to give their opening remarks about this topic today, leveraging employee communication in a VUCA economy. Panelists, welcome. I'm going to start with Olayinka because she's right beside me on the screen. All right, Olayinka, say something. Thank you.
Hi, Beryl. Thank you very much. Hello, everyone. It's a real honor to be here, and I guess 2 minutes to say something. So employees really, I think, are the first and arguably the most important stakeholders for any organization. So it really is critically important that, this group of people, this population of people are well understood and that they're well taken care of. And, the world we live in now is very unpredictable. It's challenging. We have COVID, we have the energy crisis, we have inflation, amongst many, many other things that people are dealing with. And, with the very sort of many options that are increasingly available to the best talent that are out there, organizations really in this environment have to do much more, to attract, to engage, and to retain their talent. So this conversation is really timely. I'm really looking forward to sharing, but also to learning, I think, and listening to what promises to be really exciting conversation today. And I really, really thank you guys for having me. It's a privilege. So let me stop there. Thank you very much.
All right. Thank you, Olayinka. We'll move on to Deji.
Hi, everybody. My name is Deji, and it's a pleasure to be here with you as well. I am an HR professional. I'm not a communications professional, really, but I think that the topic is apt because, like you mentioned, there's a lot of changes that's going on in the world of work now. And organizations that are serious really have to look at how they engage their employees and how they use the tools at their disposal to do that well. I hope that I would be able to bring a kind of HR perspective into this conversation and help us balance things well. So thank you. I'm looking forward to having the conversation.
Thank you. Thank you, Deji. All right, Joke.
Thank you, Beryl, and thank you to all the speakers today. I'd like to thank you for the honor of speaking. And I think the panelists have said it as well, that this is a very, very important topic to discuss, primarily in light of all that's going on and what 2020 exposed the world to: COVID, new ways of working, and a heightened sense of what employees want. You have a more informed generation of employees who are taking a closer look at what's being engaged in the workforce is all about. And conversations like this help both employees and organizations have a sense of creating a platform to move forward together where both parties achieve a win-win situation. So I'm really excited to share from my own experience and particularly also to learn from everyone here. So once again, thank you for having me.
Okay, thank you, everyone. I'm excited about this opportunity, and everyone in the chat box is talking about how excited they are to be here. Today, we're talking a lot about employee communication. Employee communication is also internal communication, and it's the communication that happens within an organization. So our first question to Olayinka is, what makes employee communication effective?
Thank you, Beryl. So that's a loaded question. I think there's a lot that could make employee communications effective, but let me just maybe share a couple of things just from my experience and working with others as well, that is really key to making your comms, the things that you say, and almost even the culture in an organization really, the way you want it to be, in a way that's productive and valuable for the people within the organization. So first of all, I think with employee communications, you have to be very clear about what you want to say. So clarity of message is really key. With any kind of communications, it's often said that you've not communicated until the person you are communicated to understands what you intended to say, the way you intended to say it, So communication really happens on the side of the receiver and not of the sender. So clarity of message is really key at every level within the organization. And then also you begin to look at things like, the why, for example, the why you're sending a message, being very clear around that. And then you move on to things like, the how, the suitability of the platform or the medium, for example, tone of voice, how are you saying the things that you're saying? And if the occasion is a somber one where, jokes should not be told, then, don't be telling jokes. What are the kind of formats that you're using to send your message? I think that's also really important and will have an impact on how people receive the message that you're sending. And then you want to look at things like authenticity and being just true to yourself. The person who's delivering the message, is that a trusted person? Is that someone that has authority? Is that someone that is the natural choice sort of within an organization to deliver that message, for example? I've just actually been in a training today where we were discussing the importance of line managers. And, you need to ask yourself, is this information something that the CEO should be delivering, or is it a conversation between a line manager and their team member? So that kind of understanding of who kind of delivers the message is also very important. And then maybe, and there are a couple of other things I will say, but let me just say this finally to say that measuring your communications is really critical. There's no way you can be sure about effectiveness if you don't measure to be sure that the information you're sharing has been well received. And I do find that, for us, I think as a profession, we don't do enough measuring, we don't pay enough attention to measuring and looking for the insights, that are really driving the work that we're doing. So I think maybe those 4 things, if I'll stop there, and I'm sure the other panelists will have other things to add. So thanks.
Fantastic, fantastic. I wrote down some of the things, and I hope our participants are also taking notes, because you talked about what the communication is about, the why of the communication, the tone of voice, who is passing that communication. Some of those things will determine if that employee communication will be effective or not. And Shola has been kind enough to also post a few things on the chat box. She talks about clarity of messaging, clarity of messaging. She's even taking notes from what you're saying. Communication happens on the side of the recipient and not just on the sender. She also mentioned some things to consider: the platform, the content, the tone of voice, yes, and the impact on the people. That's where you talked about measuring. Who is measuring it? This communication that's going out, who is measuring it, whether it's effective or not? Ubadire has put some other things there. Fantastic. 7 C's of effective communication. We'll get onto that. Our next question is now to Deji. All right, Deji, how can organizational leaders foster an environment of dialogue, collaboration, and co-creation? Olayinka has talked about how communication can be effective and some of the factors that need to be looked at. So you tell us how organizations can foster that environment for effective communication, dialogue, collaboration, and co-creation. Thank you.
Right. I think it is key for serious organizations to pay attention to creating safe spaces where employees can air their opinions. One of the things we say in the HR space is the talk about employee voice. It's important that employees have a voice and that they have a safe space to express it. When we talk about safe spaces, we're talking about places where they can express it without fear of retribution. They know that they can say what they have to say, and there's nobody who's going to be hitting them with the hammer on account of what they've said. So we use surveys that are anonymized. In reality, there's no survey that can 100% be anonymized, but the authenticity of what we do with the data behind the survey is what tells the employee that it's a safe space to express opinion. So I'll say 1, create safe spaces. Number 2, use town halls. Never before in the history of our work life, I've been working for upwards of 20 years, have I attended as many town halls in the last couple of years. But I find that it's an effective tool to actually disseminate a lot of excellent information. You have senior members of the company or leadership that are disseminating key messages in town hall formats. And we have all the tools to do virtual town halls now. So use them and use them effectively. The challenge comes many times when key leaders are not effective communicators. So they shy away from this public viewing because it looks like a public lynching if you don't know how to express yourself well in the public space. But it's a very strong tool for how we can create that environment where there's dialogue and collaboration. Town halls afford employees the opportunity to actually ask direct questions that are not scripted. I've seen scripted town halls too, by the way, but avoid that and create opportunities where people can actually ask clear, concise questions that speak to what they have at the back of their mind. And I'll say lastly, leadership should be ready to react to the yearnings of the people. There's a sheet I'm going to share with you on the HR space. If somebody comes to me and says that, I have this problem, and then typically people are very animated when they talk to HR. And they come and say, I have this problem. And, one of the things we do as HR professionals is you have to listen. Sometimes as you're hearing the problems, you know you don't have the answer to the problem, or you probably know the answer, and you know the answer the person is going to get is a no. What do? You say, I'll get back to you. You spend some time to buy a little time. But what does that do? You get back to the person and you say, I'm sorry, what you want cannot happen. But you give the impression to the person you listened and you acted on it. And that makes the person go back and feel a little better than if they just came to you and then you said, I'm sorry, I can't do anything. And then it's a different way of reacting to people, to making them feel a little bit more appreciated and listened to. So that's the last point I wanted to make. React to the yearnings of the people. Actually do something. Don't just dismiss when people come with their thoughts and their needs. Don't be dismissive. That helps generally to foster an environment that encourages dialogue and speaking up. Those are my thoughts.
Thank you, Deji. I'm sure many people have had different experiences with their different HR. You know, sometimes can be painful. But thanks for sharing what you've shared today. The key thing I picked is listening and reacting to the yearnings of the people. Listening and reacting to the yearnings of the people. That's how HR and communication people should respond. We'll move to our next question, and I'll direct that at Joke. There appears to be a growing shift in the workplace, and in workforce demographics. Perhaps one can say there is an increasing emergence of a younger workforce. Now, given this, how can organizations communicate in a more intentional and authentic way that will engage all of their workforce? Let's not forget the current Japa wave.
Thank you. That is, in fact, a very clear statement you've made. True. You see now that there are more young people in organizations, and I think it's a factor of the country's demographics. Over 50% of the population are young people, and so this, in one way or the other, would filter into the work environment. Now, what can organizations do to communicate more in a way that's intentional and authentic? I think the very first thing is to understand your current demographics. Who are the people in your organization? Can you still hear me? Beryl, can you still hear me? You froze for a moment.
I can hear you. I can hear you
Okay.
loud and
Okay, the screen froze for a moment. So yes, I was saying, understand the demography of your organization. Who are they? Mostly young people? Is it a mix? Do you have more middle-aged people? Understand them, and then more importantly, understand how they want to be engaged. You find that there's a generation of people who are the long epistle generation. They want to take their time, they want to read, they want to understand, if possible, use synonyms to understand the big words you've put in there. But then you also have a generation of people who are very 1 minute minded. Not that they don't care for the details, but they want a quick, straight to the point so that they can make decisions on the go. So first, understand your demographics and how they like to be engaged. The second thing is involve employees in this communication journey. Oftentimes, there's a lot of dependence on comms to translate what the organization is trying to say. There's a lot of pressure also on HR to come up with initiatives that create balance in terms of engagement, and just essentially keeping that story around, this is what your organization is doing, we're working in your best interest and all. But I would say do things differently. Involve employees in this communication process. We live in a world now where people have their own platforms, where they are becoming specialists at comms, who are already, if you may say, influencers within their own space. You have them in your organization. Nothing stops you from expanding the comms team to have a comms working group that support you in crafting messages that go out to staff. They have the ear of the people as well. They know the pain points of people. They know what matters to people. They even know how people want to be engaged with. Some people would say, or do a newsletter or do a broadcast. You would actually have feedback from people who would tell you, no, let's have focus group conversations. Let's have that town hall. Let's have a coffee break session with the CEO and the like. So I'll say involve employees in that communication journey. Lastly, act on feedback. I think there's nothing as frustrating to people when you keep saying, oh, we'd like to hear more from you, share your comments, and we'll be happy to look into it. And then maybe in 10 years' time, something will get done. I think it's important.
Okay, I guess that's an internet issue. But key things that she said, understand your demographics, have a comms working group if possible, involve employees in that communication journey, and act on feedback. Act on feedback. Okay, I'll call on Deji now to, shed some insights on that same question. Do you want me to go over the question again, or you're fine?
No, that's fine. I just wanted to add to what Joke already said. We can tend to assume that the workplace has entered into some kind of great replacement. Like the workplace is full of millennials now. Let's not forget, we still have a good number of baby boomers and Gen X's there. Those people kind of think differently. They have different expectations, and we have to be able to balance those needs. So it's important to, like Joke said, it's important to understand the demographics and really know what serves to whose needs. Sometimes we can tend to go full-blown millennial, and everything is on Twitter, it's on Slack, it's on Teams, it's on, but we forget that there's some people who get their news from hard newspapers. There's some people who still prefer memos. And those people are the leaders sometimes in your organization. So adapt your style. I just saw in the chat now, some people still prefer radio. So adapt your style to the crux of your organization. Try to find the balance. In my experience, and in just to share an experience that we have leaders in the company that are now we've proliferated Teams and all that stuff everywhere, and we're sending messages out in Teams and on Yammer and on SharePoint and on intranet, and all these guys sometimes have you've disseminated all that messaging and they have no idea what you said. It's been there for weeks, and they're asking you the question, I didn't get your email, right? I put it on Teams. And so Teams, what Teams channel are you talking about? Some people don't even know how to navigate that stuff. So it's the balance that we need to find to make sure that we're using the right mediums to address the needs of the workforce.
Interesting. So workplace has entered the great replacement phase, need analysis of your demographics and finding the balance. Olayinka wants to add something to this to this conversation.
Yeah, I mean, this is really interesting, and I absolutely agree with what Deji and Joke have both said. I think another important aspect, and I guess it's just putting it a little differently, or just borrowing, I think, from what our colleagues in marketing do. And that's a really cool trick or hack that helps with when we're segmenting our audiences and when we're trying to really get to know our demographic. And that's when we develop personas. It's something that I have found works really well when you break your audiences into personas and you give them names. And I mean, going all the way. You say, here is Maureen, meet Maureen. She's, 25 years old. She does this, she likes this, she spends her weekends doing this, and really getting to the heart of the people that you're speaking to. I think getting that insight from each group of people really helps you to target your messages, to cut through all of the clutter that comes their way on a daily. We all know this, right? So getting to the heart of it, building those personas, and then really speaking to those people will help with how you understand, segment, and reach your audiences.
Thank you, thank you. We have an engaging audience, and they're saying a lot of nice stuff. Somebody talked about keeping it simply simple. Some people describe that also as keeping it short and sweet. And somebody mentioned again the inclusive communication, use of digital technology that is simple and clear. Thank you. Keep those comments coming in. The segmentation and targeting, also key. Thank you. Keep those comments coming. We'll try to fast track. There's so much to be said. To give us context, we've been looking at the context of people communication and management under the broad topic we're discussing today. Next question in this area is, what are some of the ways organizations and business leaders can build an engaged workforce? Joke, you want to help us with that? How can organizations and business leaders build an engaged workforce, considering how Forbes says that 75% of the workforce today are not engaged? Help us.
I think that's a very interesting question. And when thinking about it, I think the first thing is your employees need to feel and sense and know that they matter. Your employees need to understand and see you act it out in your engagements with them, that they're not just people behind computers that churn numbers, churn reports, engage clients to make profit and everybody goes home. They're beyond that. And this is where diversity and inclusion plays a huge role. How are you bringing them into the core of what's going on in the organization? So I'll say the first thing is bring them into conversations from the beginning. You want to roll out projects, you want to roll out initiatives. And this is just an example. Imagine situations like that where your employees hear about them outside first and not internally. They are your first key stakeholders. Engage them on early, whether it's you're launching a campaign, whether there's even an issue. I would say even the good, the bad, and the ugly, let them know from the onset. I started talking about feedback opportunities. It's really key for people to know, and I think this was said earlier, that people need to know that they can speak up about things that are important, that if they have ideas, that these ideas can be reviewed, they can be looked at in terms of the bigger objectives and agenda of the bank, and that, who knows, they can be implemented. So I would say feedback is really important. And the funny one that I like is empowered ownership. And why I smile is that I know in most organizations, if you come up with a challenge to say, oh, there's a problem here, this is what I think the organization to do, smart leaders would say, okay, fantastic, this is something you're passionate about, can you lead the way? So if it's one way, it is another way to keep your people engaged when you are able to empower them to drive ownership on certain initiatives, whether it's something that is more to their benefit or even towards moving the organization forward. I think if we're able to bring them up early from the onset, give them the opportunity to share their feedback, but most importantly, empower them to take ownership of certain initiatives, I think it drives a stronger sense of engagement with your employees. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Again, I commend all our participants. Questions are rolling in. We have one from Ismaila Mohammed, and it's directed at Olayenka. He's saying, understanding employee psychographic as well as workplace characteristic is also key in employee communication, especially in a data-driven Vuca economy. I like this guy. What do you think is the role of the employee? What should the employee do, to make communication also clear? Because we've been speaking from the angle of leaders. What's the role of the employee? Olayenka.
Thank you, Beryl. So that's a great question. I think everybody has a role to play within that ecosystem, right? So on the part of the employee, I think two things that really are important is that they should be willing to listen and be willing to negotiate, I think is maybe the word. So listen in terms of understanding where the organization is coming from. A great example is a debate that is on for everybody now, I'm sure, is this sort of hybrid working, remote working, going back to the office kind of conversation, right? Everybody understands that there's convenience that comes with working from home. You know, it's been proving that there's increased productivity. Of course, there are also some downsides like wellness and all the other things. But, you know, organizations now wanting their people to come back into the office without necessarily giving them an explanation why, and just saying, oh, you know, you were doing it before, why can't we go back to doing that? Meanwhile, on the employee side, they now, you know, have time to pick up their kids from school. Maybe they have time to do the things in the evening that they don't always have time to do. So the organization has to understand, you know, where the employee is coming from, but the employee also has a role in understanding where the organization is coming from. It's not just about doing your work. You know, sometimes there are benefits, and not just sometimes, there are actually benefits to being in the office, you know, having more ears to talk to, having a sounding board, people to reach out to. And so there has to be that willingness to listen on the side of the employee, and also to negotiate, to compromise. I don't really like that word, but to negotiate and to meet the organizations and the employers halfway, so that there is a win-win, you know, for both. So those are the two things that I would say that are really important on the side of the employee when they're coming in to have a conversation with the organization on any key issues or critical issues that are important to their well-being.
Thank you. Thank you. So employees have a role to play. Another interesting question from Shola Abulu is, how do you articulate the business value of employee communications to business leaders in tangible business terms? How do you articulate the business value of employee communications to business leaders in tangible business terms? And this is key because many business leaders don't understand the role, the significance of employee communication to the organization. Please help us in 2 minutes. Thank you, sir.
Okay, I will just use an analogy to answer that question. And this is what we call in our space the engineers or the accountants question. When you have business leaders that are engineers or accountants, they're very numeric and they want to see value in numeric terms. There are some things that you cannot quantify simply in numeric terms. I cannot quantify how much value my spouse brings to me in the house. It's unquantifiable. It's just, I just know that because she's there and we feed off each other, we can build a family that works. That's the analogy I want to share. Yes, there are some things you can measure. You can measure, you know, how if you do engagement surveys every 2 years or so, you can measure that against your productivity and see if there's some kind of correlation between how engaged people are and the profitability that you have, or productivity. But you ask the question, how do you actually measure productivity in an organization like a bank or a marketing firm? Well, how do you measure productivity? These are really difficult conversations to have with business leaders who think about productivity simply in terms of dollars and cents and profitability, right? But it's a careful balance that one needs to find. And you need to educate your business leaders that some of these metrics do not directly translate to the business numbers, but they have an underlying effect on how the environment itself functions. You can have an extremely toxic environment where communication is really horrible, but it's making a lot of money. And how do you balance that? How it's making a lot of money can be a completely different question. So I would say business leaders need to be honest, those who have gone through the proper training, they know this. And some of them that stress you out to try to prove yourselves in really authentic financial terms are just trying to break your back. They know the value of what you bring as communicators and as managers of the messaging. The other thing you should know is that in the kind of profession, the communicator's profession is a profession where if everything is quiet, it means it's fine. It's when things really go bad that you see the value. When a company can lose billions of dollars because a wrong tweet went out, then you see the value of the communicator. You see the value when a company can lose its biggest talents and assets because a wrong email went out, or because you communicated in a wrong way during a town hall. Then you see the value of constructing those messages. It's really the opposite side. Like, what is the risk if we do this role wrong?
Like what happened with Polaris Bank recently, right?
I don't know what happened with Polaris Bank, unfortunately.
Oh, you missed that. Okay. I'll share if there's time. It was just communication.
Okay, that's my contribution to that subject. I wanted to also add, if you don't mind, just a second, when we're talking about engagement and all, the Gallup study that we often refer to, it looks like 75% of people are not engaged. And then there's a group of people, it says, are engaged, and then the other group that are actively disengaged. In our world, we say it's important to try to change those who are not engaged, do the interventions. The people who are actively disengaged are toxic in your organization. You need to find ways of slowly easing them up. You cannot engage everybody. You have to find ways of making sure that, okay, these people do not infect the ambience in your organization, and you have to find ways of slowly easing them to other people where they can be better managed and engaged. I guess it's just a contribution to that thought.
Thank you. Thank you. If you're just joining us, you're welcome to the 7th edition of the virtual talk series powered by the IADC West Africa Interest Group. We're moving to another segment of this conversation, and it's about policies, processes, and tools. Since the onset of the pandemic and beyond, organizations globally are facing a change on how employees work. Employees are reevaluating the way they work with the way they choose to or they want to work. This change in work style brings along a new focus in workplace culture, policies, processes, tools. Now, trust and transparency is often marred when organizations introduce these new policies and tools or integrate new processes to their system. The outcome is a break in communication. And to elaborate on this, we'll be asking key questions. We'll start with Olayinka. The first question is, can organizations balance the need for these three elements: policies, processes, and did you get that?
We lost you for a second there.
Oh, really? Okay, I'll take the question again. In what ways can organizations balance the need for these three elements: policies, processes, and tools, with the need to retrain employees, keep them connected and engaged with the organization's strategy for these three elements: policies, processes, and tools?
Okay, we lost you again a little bit in the middle of that, but I think what I'm trying to say is, how can organizations balance sort of these three aspects in keeping their employees engaged? Am I right?
Yes. How can they keep the employees engaged while balancing policies, processes, and tools?
Yeah, so I would say just keeping things simple. I think someone said it earlier on, keeping things very, very simple. I think sometimes we trip ourselves up in the corporate world with some of the things that we put in place. Of course, it's important to be compliant. It's important to do the things that we need to do. But it's also very important to keep things simple and keep your policies and your processes simple and transparent. This is so, so important. Employees need to understand, you know, your policies around things like promotions, around things like pay rises, around things like pay equity, you know, around things like, you know, equity of opportunities for everybody across the foundation. All of these sorts of policies that we put in place need to be transparent, and they need to be easily understood by everybody. So policies and processes and tools, I think we need to just understand that they are enablers, right? They're supposed to make our lives easier and to help us to do the things that we want to do. So they really shouldn't be getting in the way. So I would say keeping things simple around those tools, keeping them very straightforward and easily understood, and then keeping them transparent. Let there be clear rules and understanding around how these things get done. You know, I've been in organizations where bonuses are not, like, you don't know what bonus you're going to get until you get into your end of year conversation. But I've also been in organizations where you know everybody has the formula and you know exactly what you've done and you can work it out, you know exactly what you're getting. You know, promotions are fair and open, you know, so all of those sorts of things I think really need to be built into the way we organize ourselves and our policies and our tools and the framework, so that employees understand these to be simple to understand, transparent and fair.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Quickly, the next question: how can leaders during this period of change and transformation in the organization, how can they maintain organizational trust and transparency? Olayinka mentioned that word severally, transparency. How can leaders, you know, maintain this while change is happening? Joke?
I would say definitely reassuring people. We established that we live in a world where there's a lot of uncertainties, and that plays out even in the workplace. Bringing it closer to the idea of, let's say, hybrid working, you find that a lot of employees who may genuinely want to consider that are hesitant because of perceptions of, if I choose to work hybrid, I may be tagged as lazy or incompetent. I may be out there in the market pricing pepper, whereas I'm supposed to be doing something in the office. But if there's reassurance to the to employees to help them understand that your performance is what is the priority, you delivering on your objectives, whether you're in the office or out of the office, is key. So reassuring that you're not going to be penalized, there's not going to be a negative perception around you if you want to explore that path is really key. I think another thing is also ensuring, I'm speaking to Olayinka's point about transparency. Let's keep rewards as open as possible. You have perceptions from people that feel, oh, it's because I'm in the office versus someone working at home. That is why XYZ is receiving more opportunities, getting more access to learnings and all whatnot versus me at home. I think it's very important that in how assessments are done, how performance is reviewed, so that people understand what they have to do. I think it was Olayinka that said it's a 50-50 thing. Everything isn't the responsibility of the organization alone. There's the role of the employee, which is also to reassure your employer that you are doing the right thing. One of the values in my organization is doing the right thing. So it's important you are also committing to that, to do the right thing. I think one other point before DJ also can add his own views is acting based on data. I think we cannot overemphasize the role of data in this economy now. It's so easy for organizations to make decisions based on what they think employees need, or based on what they think works from a policy perspective or from an implementation perspective. So it's very important. Yes, some things are sacrosanct in the interest of the organization. However, in ensuring that these things are excellently executed, it's important for organizations to work with data. Do your staff understand this policy? Where are they struggling? Is there a bottleneck in the process? Can we simplify the process? How can we ensure that we are achieving the same goals collectively as an organization? Again, not wanting to sound like a broken record, I think this is where inclusion matters. If you're bringing your staff early and making decisions based on the data you're getting from them, it makes that whole journey less complicated and simpler for everyone to be on board with.
Okay, thank you, Deji. just quickly add something to
Just
that?
add a few words to what Joke said. I've said it before, use more sessions where you engage directly with your employees, town halls, breakfast meetings. People do appreciate when they're sitting together with business leaders and they're able to ask questions and get out what's on their mind. Business leaders also receive the feedback and they can feel the pulse right there and then. They can tell what's on the hearts and the minds of people by the frequency of the kinds of questions they get. Schedule those things, rather than say, we're only going to do a town hall when there's something to say, schedule them, and then look for what to say when the town hall comes around. Okay, and if there's nothing to say, just have those sessions as Q&A sessions. Who has a question? Who has something to say or ask? It creates that environment of transparency and openness for conversation with the employees that you manage.
Okay, thank you, Deji. I like our audience, they're asking questions, and somebody has a question for Joke. The question is, do you think employee communication contributes to the reputation of an organization? How does this affect external stakeholders with regards to overall reputation of an organization?
That's a very interesting question, and I can give an example. I remember during the pandemic, or just as we're coming out of the pandemic, there was an institution that sent its employees an email, a very strongly worded email about returning to work and what would happen if you're not returning to work and the likes and the likes. And unfortunately, you had a few employees who felt quite offended about it and took pictures of it, because I believe, obviously, because of their tech infrastructure, you're unable to forward those kind of emails to personal accounts without it being monitored. But they took pictures of it and put it all over social media. And the organization received a lot of backlash because things around their humanity with regards to their employees came into question. Things around employee wellness, things around inclusion. How are you supporting staff who are going through, even staff who had been affected by COVID? The very fact that the email strongly worded said people had to come in, whatever, and also almost somewhat threatening job loss made people question, really, was this a human institution to work for? So to the question, yes, employee communication plays a big role in the reputation of an organization. If you're communicating with your employees in such a way that they feel respected, they feel like they matter, they feel that they play an integral part in the grand scheme of things in the organization, they, as your ambassadors, if you may, of the organization, speak in that same manner about it. One of the survey questions that we share with staff periodically is this an organization you'd want to invite people to work in? Now, because we are putting out things that we believe make staff comfortable to want to stay with us, there isn't the fear that, people may go out and say all manner of things. Of course, you can't please everyone, like Deji said, but you are putting out things that provide a balanced perception of the organization and allows people to come to their own conclusion. So yes, how you communicate with your employees can affect the reputation of the organization in a good way or in a bad way. That's where there's a lot of work that needs to be done in ensuring that things are done as professionally as possible. I hope I answered your question well.
Thank you. Thank you. That was a good one. Thank you. Quickly, we'll move on to Deji as we wrap up this segment. With employees re-examining the way they choose to work and where they work, how can organizations and their leaders ensure that policies, processes, and tools are not reactive, but collaborative? Deji.
Yeah, I read that question in the pre-read and I found it interesting. I think that by design, policies are reactive. They're reactive because we have to adapt to the realities of our environment to design policies. Whenever we design a policy, we're really looking at what is the risk of certain negative thing happening and how do we block it. So it's either we are reacting to that risk having already occurred, or we've seen it happen somewhere else, and then we are reacting to make sure we set guardrails in place so that it does not occur with us. Take, for example, now organizations have a lot of policies around social media use. Why? It's because there's a proliferation of social media. And we've seen that in certain organizations, it can have a negative effect. So if we don't want it to happen in ours, we put the guardrails in place by writing up a policy. But I'll come back to something that that Joke said at the beginning. How do you mitigate against just sitting down, an executive sits down in the office and says, this is the rule from now on, and it's written in the policy and it's signed off. Involve them in how that policy is designed. Okay, this is what we're thinking about. We've seen what happened in company X. We would like to implement something similar here, but we want to hear from you what you think. Sit down with them, let them be part of constructing it. And it gives them ownership of those policies and processes when you design it. Don't just copy and paste. Bank A did this, therefore we're going to copy. And that's what a lot of people do. There's places where people go online and research policy on such and just copy and paste it and then implement it in their organizations. It doesn't work like that anymore. Understand the dynamics of your environment. Speak to the people who the policies affect, and design something that works in your environment. That's my one other thing I'll add to that, which I find very powerful. We don't use it a lot of, is to run focus group discussions. Oh my, it's super powerful. You put different people together, a diverse set of people, and you just put them in your room and say, what do you think of this? Okay, if I wrote this policy and it had this paragraph, what would your reaction be? And you will see different people reacting in different, it will tell you straight up how you should adapt the policy to your unique situation.
Deji, while you are still speaking, can you answer, speaking about measurements and metrics, in your opinion, is all data received from feedback tools or similar events, are they relevant? What role does it play in employee communication?
So the question of relevance is a question that should be asked in advance of the design of the feedback tool. By the time you've designed the feedback tool and you're giving outcomes, the question of relevance is moot. So it's about how our feedback tools are designed. When they're in their design stage, that's where the question of relevance needs to be asked. Everything that comes from, I'm a data-driven person. My job in HR has largely been data related for the last 8 years. When you've already run the feedback tool, say a survey or all that, everything you get from it is assumed to be relevant, else there was no need for you to go through all that stress to get the information. That question needs to be asked and done before the feedback tools are launched. And how do you ensure that the information you want to get from the beginning is relevant? We're back to where we started from. Ask the people you want to ask it from. What's key? It's those things are what helps you to know what are the things I need to put into the tools to be able to get the results that I want. There are some general measures for how you measure engagement, for example. Maybe across the world, there are some 7 or 8 questions we typically ask on engagement issues. They're science-driven, they're researched, and then we agree on those things, and we generally use those questions for measuring engagement. Other than that, you want to know what's relevant, sit with the people to whom that data is going to impact and ask them what's important for you. And everything you get from it, you use it and assume it's relevant.
Wow, interesting. We've been learning so much. Ante is saying in the chat, the truth is that most organizations do not allow staff go through the handbook, and all they do is just like Deji said. Deji, will come back to you for another question, but let me come to Olayinka. Why is measuring the impact of internal communications actions relevant to igniting employee communications and organizational experience?
Thanks, Vero. So that's a really interesting question. I think internal comms data and insights really can be quite critical in how we see our employee productivity, right? How we measure things like cross-departmental collaboration, employee motivation, employee engagement, right? And how well also our people are aligned behind all of our business goals and objectives. And, like Deji said, there's always this tension around measurements, and the dollar figure, or in our case, I guess the Naira and Kobo figure, but it isn't always straightforward, right? But there are some aspects that can be measured. So things like absenteeism, for example, what is the cost to the organization of people calling in sick and productivity dropping because they're not feeling engaged, because they don't have a positive experience of the organization or the culture around the organization. So that's a question that we need to answer, right? What is it costing the organization that employees are dissuading or not encouraging other people to take up roles within the foundation, within the organization, right? I think that's a really big part of it, because for most organizations, your employees are considered to be people of authority. If I say that an organization is not good to work for, and I've worked in that organization before, I will have more authority in the mind of the listener than someone who hasn't worked for the organization before and is just giving an opinion that they heard from somebody else. I think we all know this. So it's really important to understand that, how we measure these things is not always straightforward, right? Another area is sort of line management and senior leadership. How do you measure the fact that your colleagues are not feeling inspired or feeling confident in the people that are leading them? All of these things have to do with internal comms engagement, and they may not be readily or directly connected in that way, but you see the effects, right? So I think maybe some of the things we should be considering are things like, how do we maybe draw the thread across the enterprise to say, something is happening on this side, but we can see the effect on that side. Managing all of the actions and all of the, engagements and campaigns and projects that we have around employee organization is critical to that experience. If people don't feel, if they don't feel it, like they say, what is it they say, that we want to know how much you care before we know how much you know, right? It's people are emotional, we're whole beings. Our brain works well, and that's why you're hiring us, but also we come with all of the emotional stuff that comes with that. So understanding that the importance of measurement and the things that may not be quantifiable, and then coupling that with the things that are quantifiable, like the amazing projects and things that we do in our various workplaces. I think they really go hand in hand to make the whole experience and to I guess, build the culture. Maybe that's the catch-all word that I will use, the culture of the organization and how your colleagues experience, the organization as a whole.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. If you're just joining, we're talking about leveraging employee communication in a Vuca economy. And the conversation has been broken into 3 bits so far: people, communication and management, policies, processes and tools. And now we are on measurements and metrics. A survey conducted by IABC on internal communication shows that 70% of employee communication professionals globally see internal communication as a significant driver of engagement between employees and business leadership, while less than 50% report having tools to measure how internal communication activities impact business. Now, great questions have been coming, and we are taking them. Ante, we've seen your question and we're going to ask it, but I want to move on to Joke quickly. Okay, why is measuring the impact of internal communication action relevant? Okay, we've talked about that. The question I have for you is, what are the main areas you believe need to be measured to improve employee experience? The main areas that need to be measured to improve employee experience, Joke.
So thanks for this. I think I can answer this along 3 parts. I think the first thing is job satisfaction. If your employee is disconnected on the job, where it's beyond BAU, it's now I have to do this job because I have to, or I'm doing this job because I'm on my way out, then you have a big problem. What is making your employee no longer engaged from a satisfaction perspective on the job? What has changed? Has the role become BAU? Has the work become same old, same old? Is it that there's an absence of opportunities to explore other things within that organization or to move roles. Those are some things to quickly check. Job satisfaction. Another thing would be your employee assistance program, or how some organizations call EAP. What do you actually do to support the softer side of life for your employee? Is there a sense of care? Is there a heightened sense of care? Do your employees feel that I matter? And I use this word a lot because it's something that we've seen as a recurring theme. Employees now have a better understanding of self. There's a better understanding, there's a stronger sense of value. Do your employees feel that you care about those issues that matter to them? Work-life integration, support healthcare-wise. If there is an absence of that, then a sense of engagement that you want from employees would definitely be on the decline. So it's a very important place to measure how well do your employees feel that their softer things, if you may, are being catered to. And then association with the brand. Are your employees proud to be working for you? And these can be measured along different things, even going down to how you, they perceive you within the economy, the community. Are you doing things for good? Are you doing things the right way? Are you making an impact? Your way towards achieving prosperity, is it sustainable? Is it bright? Does it align with regulator policies and the likes? If your employees feel a sense of disappointment with the brand, that things are done without a sense of integrity, chances are that level of engagement that you want from them, that employee experience that you want to be heightened, would be on the decline. So for us to look at how we can improve the employee experience, I think it's important for us to look at it. Are they happy on the job? What can we do to change that? Are there opportunities they can explore? What are we doing around our employee assistance program? If I can just share a bit, one of the things we do at my organization is what we have is employees resource groups. And these are driven by employees around different pillars of things that staff themselves have put to the table to say matter to them. So these are things around how do you support men in the workplace? How do you support millennials in the workplace? How are you supporting people with disabilities in the workplace and the like? So I think it's very important if employees also take a step back to look at what are those things that staff themselves are saying. Again, going back to the big word data, using that data to influence some of the things that they can then use to improve the experience. I think that goes a long way. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you so much. We have a question here from Auntie. The question says, how should companies control data for staff that are working at home? And is it possible for such companies to control data for remote workers? Deji, you want to answer that?
The straight answer to that is yes, but with a lot of care. I will give a specific example. When in a previous job in another African country, the management team were concerned. This was pre-COVID. The management team were concerned that the people did not seem to be showing up physically at work, or sometimes staying long enough for the 8 hours commitment that they had in their contracts. And they came to HR and said, can you do a study on not just absenteeism, we want to see who's there. Okay, and we went into the data and said, how do we do this? And we found, okay, we can actually ask the access control team to give us the data because people have to badge into the building. So we asked for data. First of all, it was a big mess because this was my first introduction to what they call big data. Because you cannot imagine how many times people badge to enter into the building, and all the badging spots around all the company facilities. And then when you get the data dump from 1 month's worth of entry and exit, even Excel can't deal with it. It's too much. Anyway, that's by the way. But the fact is, the data was there. There was data to tell us who's in the building, when do they come, and when do they leave? What doors do they enter, and what doors do they leave from? And we tried to, match this data. We got rid of all the noise and then tried to make sense of the data for management. There was also another data we could have accessed. When do people log in, and when do they log out? How long do they stay active, and how long are they inactive? All that data we also got from IT. And then we had to make a decision on, okay, which one actually makes sense. When we looked at the data of who logs in and who logs out and when they log in and log out, it doesn't tell a whole story of presence. Okay, it just says that this person was on their computer and this person was not. So all the times they were in meetings, all the times they went out to clients' locations and all that was not recorded. You cannot therefore say that this data tells you who's working and who's not, right? But at the same time also, the data on who enters the building and who and when they leave does not also tell the complete story. Anyway, we made a choice and we said we're going to use the access control data, but we're not going to call it absenteeism data. We're just going to say it is presence in the building. This data tells you who is present in the building on X date to X date. To finish the story, when we eventually did the analysis, we actually found that people were working significantly longer than what management was thinking. So they probably had a couple of people on their mind that they had seen, but averagely people were doing 9 to 10 hours daily based on the data that we had. We even spotted some people who were spending 18 to 24 hours in the office to try to meet up with their deadlines, which we wouldn't have spotted except we looked at the data. To answer the question, yes, you can do it. As to how you interpret the data and what sense you make of it, you have to be careful how you use it.
I think the person's challenge is that locally here now, with some of the organizations here, maybe the challenge will now be how those in charge, those in leadership, do they have the capacity to do that? I saw somebody in the chat mention a question asking, how are we hiring leaders? So it's also, well, I don't know how to answer that. That's up to you, but it brings to question capacity and looking at what we have here in our climb. This you're saying, where did it happen, Nigeria or abroad?
No, it happened in Africa. It happened in Angola. So it's very similar.
Africa. Okay. Are they measuring remote work?
Like I said, this was pre-COVID. Yeah. So in a remote working environment, it will be important to check who's logging in and when they're logging out. If somebody's working remotely, you expect that they will be working from their desk, right? And they will be using their computer more often. I would assume from my data cap that you would want to use data on when they log in and when they log out, that kind of stuff. But it doesn't mean that people can't game the system if they know what you're doing, right? What's important at the end of the day is to school the people who are going to make decisions on this. Always raise their hand and say, all that this data tells you is when Mr. X logged in and when he logged out and how long he stayed active. It doesn't tell you if he was working or not. The times that he was not logged in does not mean he wasn't working. So you have to be careful how you interpret that data and what you use it for. We kept on, every time we presented the data to management, we continue to reiterate that. The first slide we will say is, this data only shows presence in the building from day X to day Y. That's all. How you choose to interpret that data and what actions you take from it is a completely separate question, but it doesn't tell you who was working. It only tells you who was in the building.
Okay, Ante, I hope we've answered your question. Quickly to Olainka, we're wrapping up. How can communication professionals effectively analyze data so that it has better effects on employee communication? Olainka.
Yeah, so I think that question applies the same to everybody, whether you're in communications or you're not. And I think that is really looking for the insights, looking for the piece of information around which your campaign or your project is going to be built, the why of what you're getting at. And so, I saw this graphic once, and I'm going to try and explain it, where it had lots of data points and everything was all scrambled up together. And it said that this is knowledge. And then you go through the phase of, you move from knowledge to understanding and all of that. And you just go through like 3 or 4 stages, and then you get to the insight. I think a lot of times people, like Deji was saying, you just get the knowledge, just get the data dump, and you just have all this stuff. It doesn't tell you anything. It doesn't mean anything. People are just, it's just information. And so, in the same way anybody else might approach it, I think we need to find the key insight behind the information and the measurements that we have. What is it that information that we've received, what does it mean, right? And getting to the heart of it. Another really important thing is to have a baseline and just have something that you're working off of, right? Being able to understand what has happened and the shift that has been made, either way, good or bad. Being able to understand that this is where we were and this is where we are now. If you don't have a baseline, you don't really have anything to compare to, and that can make it a little bit more difficult to get at the reasons behind why something has happened, or to even have a full understanding of the measurements that you have. So it's really important to sort of be able to get to the heart of that thing, have that insight, and then have a baseline that you're working off of, so that you have something to compare to, you have something that tells you that you're moving in the right direction.
Okay, thank you, Olayinka. I'm going to ask one more question. We'll answer that quickly and then we'll wrap up. Given that communication functions to also serve as a feedback system, how can practitioners integrate measurement mechanisms into the organization's overall ecosystem, Deji?
That's a hard question for me. Because I know how to measure HR stuff. I don't know how to measure comp stuff. Off the top of my head, I would say that back in the days, in the .com days, we used to be able to measure clicks. We used to be able to measure clicks. Why can't we do it anymore? Why can't we figure out who is actually accessing the messages, the electronic messages we send, and how many of it are we really getting? How many is really getting out there? Because we use several media for disseminating information, Yammer, intranet, streams, this, that, we've lost that capacity to actually measure who is reading or who is seeing these things. Another thing, of course, is when you do physical engagements with people, like sit downs, coffee and share. We have things in my company called speak and share. You can measure how many people are connected, right? How many people are present. If you start to see a decline in the people who are attending your town halls, it's telling you that your town halls are not interesting. There's no interest for them to be there. Measure those things and try to follow the trend of how those things work to tell you if you are actually engaging your audience. Those are the things I think I can recommend.
It also goes back to something Olayinka mentioned and doing an analysis of the audience. You can do that even for the employees. Joka, you raised your hand.
Yes, I just wanted to say to this point that now you do have some of those platforms that actually help you measure engagement with your comms. So in the same way you talked about click rates, you have these platforms. An example is Populo, that probably after a period, probably a week or 3 days, you can actually go back to see the data, to see what your employees engage with the most in a newsletter. So whether it's that, and it can also can also be as detailed to show you how long they engaged with it. So did they read it? Did they engage with it? And then did they take action? So did somebody forward that email to somebody to say, oh, look at this that the organization has shared, what do you think? So there are quite a number of tools that are coming up in that space to help comms practitioners track what is resonating with employees and also fine-tune their messaging to ensure that these are improved subsequently in subsequent posts. Just wanted to mention that.
Thank you. While you were talking, I remembered that there are also small businesses who actively use WhatsApp group. You can go back and check the info to see who read this, when it was delivered, when they opened it, some of those things give an indication of engagement. Okay, so thank you very much, our panelists. You've been amazing. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. People are already giving their appreciation in the chat. So right now, as we wrap up, would like you to take a minute each to share your final thoughts. I'm going to start with Olai.
Thank you, Beryl. Again, thank you to the organizers and the panelists and the participants as well for great questions. It's been a really interesting and fun conversation to have with you guys. I guess I'll just go back to my original admonition, which is that employees are really critical, to an organization's success, right? And senior leaders often will say that they understand this, but it doesn't always come through in the action. It doesn't always come through in things like the policies, the processes, and importantly, it doesn't always come through in the culture of an organization. So I guess that to address that sort of talk and walk kind of piece, we really need to look at that, within organizations, because otherwise we're missing out on the best talent. There's so many options available to people now, to the workforce now, and so addressing that is going to be really critical in this era of, remote working, hybrid working, flexible working, all meaning different things. It's really important that organizations, senior leaders, internal communications also, and HR, or people and culture as they may be called, really pay attention to this to make sure that they're able to get the best talent that is available in the workplace. Again, thank you very much. It's been wonderful chatting with you all.
Thank you. Thank you, Olai and Deji. 1 minute.
Yeah, I'll just say it's been an engaging and interesting session, and thank you for having me. As a conclusion, I would say that there is no organization that can succeed well without having effective communications. And this is a key skill that has to be developed within organizational space. I saw a comment in the chat earlier that communications and HR those two hands have to learn to clap if you're going to have an effective and an engaged workspace. And I just want to reiterate that. There's one thing that one of the big management gurus mentioned, Peter Drucker, he said, what you don't measure, you can't manage. So we always have to find ways to measure things that then afford us the opportunity to manage them. Thank you very much for having me, and I hope we all had an interesting time with the event.
Thank you, Deji. It's been amazing. Jaka?
Just echoing what everyone has said, I want to say thank you as well to you for this session and to the speakers. I learned a lot from Olai and Deji. I think for me, it's just reiterating the point that comms is a two-way street. And it's the major channel your leadership engage with your employees and vice versa. And it takes a collaborative effort. Everybody has a role to play. Comms and HR, or as MNCs in some organizations, or corporate affairs in some, cannot do the work alone. And so it's important to create these opportunities, like I mentioned, that provides employees that space to be able to share their feedback, act on their feedback, support the organization to achieve its goals, and vice versa. And I know this obviously in the end makes a difference towards everyone achieving a win-win situation at the end of the day. So thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks to everyone for attending. Please kindly fill the survey when you log out. You see the link right there. When you get to YouTube, also would like you to put these nice comments I'm seeing here about the session. We need you to put that in our YouTube channel. You can just click the link there and it will take you to where you're going to put in your comments. We need that feedback. Use our hashtags. From you, the members of the audience, we thank you for joining us. We hope you've picked a lot on how to leverage employee communication in an economy like ours that is volatile, that is uncertain and all that. I'm sure you've learned a lot. We are positive you can take this back to your organizations add value in your various spaces to yourself, to your organization, and the environment. Attendees, thank you. Your participation has been exceptional, interactive. I appreciate you guys. Note that you can continue these conversations on LinkedIn. You can chat with business leaders online and offline. Check them out on LinkedIn. The flyer is there. You can check out their names. You'll find them. Put your questions on IABC WAIG page on LinkedIn, and we will get across to you. Let us also use this opportunity to recognize all the IABC members online from Africa region, Asia Pacific, Europe, and even North America. Lynette has been very active. Thank you. And of course, our host, the IABC West Africa Interest Group. Thank you so much. There's a huge support team behind me, and I appreciate the opportunity to moderate this event. Thank you all, and enjoy the rest of your evening. See you at our next webinar. God bless you. Hello.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Bye.
Thank you so much. Bye.
Bye.
We are IABC, a global community of communication professionals practicing with integrity and passion. We're diverse. Diverse as the industries and disciplines we work in. With thousands of members on every continent, we're alive with knowledge and experience. We're the voice of communication practice. We use the power of communication to connect people to ideas, to job opportunities, and to other professionals. We spark conversations. We create connection. And we have fun. We're focused on insights and results. Sure, we like cool creative, but it has to stick in the hearts and minds of our audience and provide value to our organization. We're about global best practices that are current and relevant. We live by a code of ethics. We support a global certification program, and we recognize the best of the best around the world. So, what's in it for you? Well, start with our lively and varied networking events, our regional and international conferences, our certification programs, and our award shows. Whether you're an experienced communicator or new to the field, whether you work for a corporation, government, agency, or nonprofit, IABC fits your personality and your professional goals. IABC. We use communication to engage, influence, counsel, and execute. We connect communicators around the world. We are IABC.